I'm Christopher Schoenwald, and welcome to Life as a show intently focused on helping people find their professional pathway by exploring and unearthing the details of jobs from around the world. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to throw this out there. I have a channel over on YouTube, Life as a ... which basically hosts highlights from these audio conversations that I have with these great guests. They typically run 10 to 15 minutes, and they're there to kind of present a different vantage point. You know, for people that aren't into audio, aren't into podcasts, but are still looking for career advice, ideas, help, all that great stuff, send them over to YouTube. Like I said, Life as a ... And if you do get over there, I would love that like or subscribe. I mean, it's the best way to let that algorithm know that the content is worth sharing and should be out there. So anyway, I do thank you for letting me plug this a little bit, but I think it's about time to get into today's episode. You know what? I think it's about time to get into the weeds of one of the oldest and most enduring forms of entrepreneurship out there. Yeah, I'm talking about the restaurant business. Now, there are a couple of reasons I wanted to cover this option. One, it's an idea that I think everyone knows something about, while simultaneously not knowing anything about it. Does that sound right? Yeah, I kind of feel like it's one of those experiences that until you do it, you truly have no idea about what it really takes to succeed. And two, there's this whole other world of possibility associated with a food-based business. And no, I'm not referring to the starting of a franchise. What I'm talking about here is the selling of a consumer packaged good, or CPG, of a hit restaurant menu item. Well, fortunately for us, I have this great guest lined up for you, who has a wealth of experiences and insights to share on both operating a brick and mortar restaurant establishment, as well as launching and selling a packaged product in grocery shelves across an entire country. Plus, I might add his globetrotting culinary escapades also shed light on unique ways to build one's skills and experiences on a world stage. I mean, all up, this conversation is a fun one. And if you have any inkling towards exploring the idea of one day getting involved in the world of food commerce, you have to stick around. All right, well, let me more formally introduce today's guest to you, and we can do this. With nearly 30 years of culinary experience, Jared Ferrall has built an exceptional career that spans the globe in some of the most prestigious kitchens in the world. From his early beginnings washing dishes in an Italian eatery in England, Jared's passion for food propelled him to roles in Michelin-starred restaurants in Japan and beyond. Now, during his 4 years in Japan, Jared honed his craft, working alongside culinary greats such as Alan Ducasse and Gordon Ramsay, and completed advanced training at the renowned Yamato Ramen School. However, his journey didn't stop there. Jared's diverse career includes roles as a private chef, aboard super yachts, creating fine dining experiences for discerning clients while traveling the world, and leading a team at a luxury steakhouse in Australia. In 2017, Jared and his wife Mickey returned to Canada, inspired by their deep love for Japanese cuisine, to establish Crafty Ramen. Now, what started as a single ramen shop in Guelph, Ontario, has grown into a celebrated brand thanks to the collaboration of an incredible team. Crafty Ramen now operates 2 restaurant locations and sells its signature frozen ramen in over 1,500 grocery stores across all major retail banners in Canada. As Chief Culinary Officer, Jared combines his global expertise with a passion for mentoring others, driving product innovation, and sharing the joy of exceptional food. His mission? To inspire and delight noodle lovers across North America while advancing the world of modern culinary entrepreneurship. With all this noted, really excited to welcome you to my conversation with Jared Ferrall. Yeah, so welcome to the program. How are you doing today, Jared?
Good, man. Thank you. How's yourself?
Yeah, really good. Really good. Excited for this conversation for a few different reasons. I mean, I haven't really dove into the world of restaurants, restaurateurs. So that unto itself is something that I'm excited about. And then two, Crafty Ramen, based out of Guelph, Ontario, Canada. This is a place that I called home for about 4 years, a wonderful city. So I love that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And then thirdly, this connection to Japan. Life as you may know, is based out of Japan, and certainly Crafty Ramen has some of its roots there as well. So a lot to get into today. So I'm quite keen to do so. And with that in mind, I do have this first segment lined up. It's something called Coloring Wikipedia. It's a segment where I just read off a definition of something related to what the guest is all about. Now, I have you down here for restaurateur. So let me just read that off and perhaps after you comment. Sound okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so here we go. Restaurateur. A restaurateur is a person who opens and runs restaurants professionally, although over time, the term has come to describe any person who owns a restaurant. Traditionally, it refers to a highly skilled professional who's proficient in all aspects of the restaurant business. There it is, short and sweet. Admittedly, I mean, we're not breaking any new ground here, but what I'm most interested in this segment is to hear from guests and like the nuanced look at it, like what it means to them based off of their own, experiences and opinions. So, first take, what do you think about this, Jared?
Yeah, well, I think it's a pretty fair description, but it's obviously generalized. Like once you open that up and it's like proficient in all the aspects of running a business. Well, what are the aspects of running or a restaurant in this case, right? Like entrepreneurship is famous for wearing multiple hats, right? So when you're a restaurateur, I guess it depends. If you're an entrepreneur in the tech business, you're going to need to know a little bit about finance. Maybe there's a little bit of coding that you can do, etc. But like if you're a restaurateur, like can you fix toilets? How's your plumbing skills? Are you gonna be able to troubleshoot and like, are you afraid to get your tools out? Because that's what it's gonna require a lot of the times just to keep things rolling. And then you've also have to have like great customer service skills. Not all restaurateurs are chefs' backgrounds, but they should have a pretty good idea of where the food, how it's made and how it shouldn't be made. Because if you're hiring chefs, even if you're not the one that's cooking the food, you want to be able to tell if the person that you've hired knows what they're doing, if they're cutting corners, what kind of quality is going out, and your taste as well. So it's there's a lot of different hats there for sure once you start to open that up, but it's a fair description.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, I like that insight right out of the gate here. I mean, I'm sure you had an idea of going into this. We're going to get into your background pretty soon here. But, outside of that, and those comments you just made, were there any things in particular that surprised you? Like, I'm sure you had this idea, like, okay, there's going to be a lot that's going to pop up that I'm not necessarily going to be expected for. But were there a few things that stand out to you right now?
I think that learning about finance and cash flow, both between, because we started off as a restaurant company and we've moved into being a CPG company, like a consumer goods product, like our frozen ramen product now is really where the focus of our attention is because it's got a such bigger scope. So I spend a lot more of my time on that part of the business now, but just even transitioning from when I was just running the restaurants themselves, understanding like how to read a P&L, understanding the importance of the inventory and in what you were doing, cash flow, your break-even point is extremely important to know. I wish I'd known more about that before when I was doing my business plan and deciding on what I was going to open and how to do it, right? So those were elements that we touched on when I did my apprenticeship, but that's not the focus. I was a chef. I was about cooking food,
Yeah.
not about counting things and looking at spreadsheets. So that was a big eye opener for me.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that insight there. Really quickly, too, this might be an opportune time. I mean, I just mentioned off the top when introducing you and your business, but maybe we could hear a little bit more about you and Crafty Ramen itself.
Yeah, well, we've got two restaurants right now. We had three at one point, but we closed one of them down, the Toronto location down, because it was taking focus away from what's become the core of our business again, that frozen puck ramen product that we have now across Canada and 1,500 grocery stores and growing. That is sort of where the growth is. So we've really transitioned into more of like a manufacturing company. It's CPG, so there's the marketing element to that as well. We do sell it through e-com, but that was really to get it out into the world. So in a lot of ways, the restaurants themselves have taken a little bit of a back seat because since COVID, the restaurant business has become very difficult. We thought COVID made restaurants difficult, to be honest with you, compared to since COVID with all the inflation and additional costs and different consumer preferences that have happened since COVID. Really, it's made restaurants much more difficult than even through COVID. For us, COVID is where we did the pivot from started making a ramen kit first, and then eventually that turned into the frozen like heat meat product that we do. But through COVID, it was for restaurants here in Canada, anyways. You just did takeout, right? We were one of the few businesses that got to keep running. We closed down our dining rooms. In a lot of ways, yeah, there was additional cost associated with the PPE and the constant changing in regulations and what you couldn't do and what you couldn't do was extremely frustrating. And then there was the additional cost of the actual takeout containers and things. Traditionally, if you're a regular restaurant's doing 15% of its sales or whatever in in takeout, then it's not a big part of the P&L to be doing like your takeout containers. When every single bowl is going out as a takeout product, that becomes a much bigger expense and a storage capacity thing, right? Like we have a 26-seat restaurant in Guelph that turned into just a takeout spot. We had takeout containers everywhere, right? Like there was no room for anything, and but it wasn't so bad because people didn't have anything to do. People were getting takeout all the time. They were living off it. They couldn't leave their houses in Canada. So they were just like it was like every night was takeout night because it was all they could do, right? A lot of people, not everybody, had a lot more disposable income again because they weren't going out buying things because they couldn't go out anywhere to do it. And since that's happened, restaurants have become much more difficult. And we sort of have our business has moved into the CPG world. And it's a different world, it's a different space, and it takes a lot of attention and focus and a different way of looking at it. It's a completely different business, right? It's like we went into the COVID as as a caterpillar, and we've come out as something completely different. We're now a butterfly, and we're off selling our product across Canada, and we're still running the restaurants because that's where we came from, as well as leases and all kinds of other reasons. But I can't split my time. The restaurants, if they're going to be really run properly, they need to be. I would want to be there. I would want to be doing specials all the time, touching my customers. So Mickey and I have sort of divided and conquered in a lot of ways. She's still managing the restaurants.
So Mickey, of course, just for listeners' sake, I mean, is your wife and co-founder of Crafty Ramen.
Correct. Yeah. And then we have, since taking on, when we opened our second restaurant. Before we did that, we partnered with who's now our CEO, Khalil Kamis. He's the CEO. And so he sort of runs strategy and the finance team and the office team and stuff like that. I focus on producing our grocery product. Mickey focuses on keeping the restaurants running and the customers happy.
There you go. This kind of leads me into my next segment here, a day in the life. And you kind of already touched upon this. I mean, just how different I'm sure things were early on. You'd mentioned this right off the top of the show. I mean, like all sorts of odd jobs, wearing several different hats to where you're at right now. I mean, I just saw, I think on social media, on Instagram, that you're 8 years into the game. So congratulations on that. I'm sure there's been a lot of difference, from day one to where it is now. And you just sort of hinted at it, like the division of roles and how that's drastically changed the way that you approach the day. You have different roles and responsibilities. Maybe you could just dive into that a little bit more just by contrasting those periods.
Yeah. So early days when we started off, like I said, we were a 26 tiny little restaurant. Coming from the culinary background that I came from, I probably overcomplicated things. And for one, I was insisted in, and we still do make everything ourselves. But so making very complicated bowls, not just like your standard, ramen you get there. It's just, we have miso, we have shoyu, we have, shio, and that's it. Same toppings, one stock, 3 tales, go, right? We had like 16 bowls and I think we still have at the shops like 4 different tales. We've got like 7 different oils. We were making 2 different kinds of noodles. So, and we were doing all of this in a very, very, very tiny space. So it was just like grinding and pushing and, like come in at early morning and do all the prep. And then like at that shop, sometimes we would pump out 300 bowls in that day. So it would be like from the moment we opened the door into the moment we closed at night, you were just putting them up. It was madness. So that's how we started. And then as we sort of grew and we took on that, we went to that second restaurant, my role started to kind of come in. I kind of always thought of myself as like the tip of the spear because I would always be out in front of whatever we were doing next. And it's very similar to what we do now. And we're always doing a new thing, whether it's opening a new restaurant, and because we've done that a couple times, launching a new product and that requiring, okay, how are we going to make these kits, right? How are all the little components going to go into bags? What equipment are we going to buy to get those to? What now piece of software do we need to get to to manage all of this? Because there's traceability. Now we're sending into grocery stores. Now what certification are we going to have to get? Okay, now we need some new certification. Okay, what do we have to do to get that in order and stuff like that? So in a lot of ways, my job has changed, but my role has stayed the same. It's just that as we've moved along down the path, I still find myself doing similar things. But instead of doing it like, okay, how are we going to make the chashu as best we can in this pot downstairs and produce enough of it in this 600 square foot space to feed 300 people every day, day in, day out. Now it's like, okay, well, how are we going to make enough to make 9,000 of these pucks per week, right? In this space. And and these restrictions, and then how are we going to portion out this many broths? So what piece of equipment do we need to what is the flow of this? And there's always something new. So figuring out how we're going to do the next thing. So that's not changed. It's just that we just keep doing new things.
Well, I think it speaks to that point of growth, right? Growth within a business, obviously, like certain aspirations you have of taking your business in a whole different direction, in a sense, the consumer goods market, and certainly that's going to, require you to be thinking differently, as you just sort of outlined there. And also, too, I mean, like even just knowing who you are within the business. And when we were lining up this conversation in particular, we were trying to figure out who would be the best person to speak to, and whether it was you yourself or your wife or your CEO. And this division of roles and responsibilities has certainly evolved within your business once you figured out, probably along this journey, of who you are and where you're best suited to serve the business ultimately. Has that been something as well? I'm sure that's been an evolution for you.
Yeah, it is, and it is a constant evolution, even to today. Like we had a big sales strategy session, and we were talking about, we've got a guy that he's our head of a director of sales. He comes from a big CPG, like comes from Nestle for many, many years, and knows how to like get in front of and talk to, Sobeys. You know who Sobeys are, and Zehrs, and like all these big grocery store chains. He knows who to talk to, how to talk to them. He knows how to build out like the strategy within them in order to get our product into bunkers and into the different sales and promo plans and stuff like that. Like it's a language I know nothing about, right? But like at the same time, like that's not all the sales that we do. We also need to do like on the ground sales as well. So, part of today's discussion was, well, is it time for my role to change a little bit? And now maybe I should move out and get out into the stores a little bit and start doing that. So as the business continuously changes and evolves, so does, everybody's role, but especially I would say out of everybody in the company, my role changes more than anyone's. I just always seem to be trying to fill those gaps as we change, right? And then as we're settled into a routine, then we normally find somebody that can do that job properly, like a specialist in it, a professional. But until we've got that figured out, I'm gonna go do it, right?
Yeah, simultaneously, that's kind of like the best and worst parts about being an entrepreneur, depending on your vantage point. Obviously that can lead to a lot of stress and pressure and whatnot. But then also too, like on the flip side, like that's where a lot of the enjoyment comes out of it. You're constantly learning and finding out, new ways that you can kind of serve that business and new ways that you yourself as an individual can grow and develop. So yeah. I appreciate that insight there. I would like to shift the conversation back over to you a little bit here, in this pathway segment. Here we're aiming to look at, how guests or, professionals or entrepreneurs made their way into the present day, line of work. And again, off the top, I did mention some of your background, but I'd love to learn a little bit more about what pulled you into the world of culinary practice in the first place.
I fell in love with food at a very young age and started cooking, busy parents come home from school and would sort of, make myself dinner or whatever, I think is where I first kind of clicked into it. And then we moved when I was 15, moved to England. And I remember sort of there was this show, Ready Steady Cook, I think it was, in England. And it was like this, a competitive cooking show. It was very fun, tongue in cheek. But I remember watching that and thinking, oh, that's really cool. I think I want to be a chef. I love food and this is really cool. I think I'm going to go. I was given the ultimatum at that time. It was like, okay, well, you can either go back to school, which would require me to, this is England, right? So England, you can sort of get out a lot younger than you do in Canada. And it was, go back to school or go out and get a job. And I decided I was going to go out and get a job. So I went down to a local Italian restaurant and they gave me a job almost like straight away as in their salad and ice cream. It was like an ice cream parlor salad place or whatever. And that was the first place I worked at. After that, I bounced around. I tried a couple, Steve Jobs talks about like connecting the dots, looking backwards and it all makes sense. And I actually started off as in a kitchen and then I went off and one of my uncles was a carpenter. So I went to work for him for a while and I started an apprenticeship as a carpenter. Went to school for a little bit and then for one reason or another that stopped. And then my other uncle was a bricklayer. So I was like, oh, I'm going to go be a bricklayer then if I can't be an apprentice under you anymore. And then I'm going to go apprentice under him, and then started that. So I got this like, and again, I bounced around the construction industry a little bit, and then I left that and I did a little bit of sales work for a while. I just kept finding myself back into kitchens. And then I was working at uh, a pub in the kitchen again, and I was just like, man, I'm over this. I'm like, I miss Canada. I miss the snow. I was like, I saw this show on TV again, different show, but this one was all about these chalet hosts that were going off into Europe, and you'd go to Chamonix, and you would go and you would run a little chalet, and then guests would come and you'd cook them breakfast, and then you'd go out skiing all day, and they would come back and you'd cook them dinner. And I was like, that
I
sounds
could
like a
do that.
dream. I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
yeah, I was like 20 or something at the time. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. So I went down, headed, I put in an application to Crystal Holidays, which was one of the biggest companies doing it. And I got the job, and then they were in the sort of the interview. It wasn't really the interview. It was, oh no, I guess it was the final interview point. And they basically said to me like, hey, we noticed that you have a Canadian passport. Would you be interested in going to work out in Whistler? And I'm like, yeah,
Absolutely.
like absolutely. Chamonix was the dream, but this is like, I couldn't even ask for something better, right? So sure enough, they sent me off to work in Whistler. And I worked up there for a season. And then because I had a Canadian passport, I was just like, wow, this is great out here. I moved down to Vancouver and just went out wandering around again, wandered through restaurants, and I ended up working at this restaurant called Rain City Grill for Sean Cousins, celebrity chef in Vancouver at the time. I don't know why he took a chance on me, but I was like, this is amazing. So I never really worked fine dining before. This was all white tablecloth and amuse bouches and multiple course tasting menus and stuff like that. So I started working there, and he signed me up for a true apprenticeship, and I did my time with him, and then did a couple other restaurants there while I worked through my apprenticeship and got my red seal. And as part of that, generally, chefs love to go as soon as they're finished their apprenticeship. It's go to Europe or Spain or Italy or something for a year. Well, my dream had always been to go live in Japan, right? Like ever since I was a kid, I took karate, and I wanted to learn Japanese. I wanted to go to Japan. So I was just like, I'm going to go to Japan after this, right? So before I'd even finished my apprenticeship, actually, I started going to this. It was a language exchange program called the Clubhouse. And that's where I met Mickey, my wife. And we sort of just like, she loved food. I loved, I was a chef. So it was kind of this match made in heaven. And we lived in Canada. So we lived together, and then moved back to Japan together, and soon got married. And then I worked for first for Alan Cass, and then Gordon Ramsay, and then Luke Mangan was an Australian chef.
How did those opportunities come about? I mean,
Honestly, I mean, it was funny. I was in order to save the money, so I skipped over some of the stuff there because there's always more to say, right? But I worked on a very small cruise ship to save the money, because you have to have like 15K or something at the time, or 16K you had to have in the bank in order to get a visa to go to Japan, right? So I was like, okay, like how am I going to do that? So I got a job on this little cruise ship. So it was all French guys and me, very limited French. And I remember telling the guy, jokingly telling the guys, I'm going to go to Japan and work for Alan Ducasse. And they were like, yeah, whatever, buddy. Sure you are. I was like, oh, no, yeah, So sure enough, I went there, got to Japan, bought myself a suit because you got to look the part, right? And just went down there, knocked on the door. And the chef himself, Jerome, really super great chef and a really nice guy. You know, he liked the idea of having foreigners in the kitchen. This was at the time, this was like almost, God, it was like 20 years ago or something now, almost 18 years ago. It was not as common, right? Like gaijins in Japan were like, we stood out like a sore thumb. I remember last time I traveled there, it was like, my God, there was,
it's a
gaijin
lot
everywhere
different,
now.
trust me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. I was like, oh my God, this is like a different world. But like for us, it was so for him, I was a novelty, right? And it was a novelty for, I think if I'd gone to apply at Ducasse in Paris or something like that, they probably would have laughed me out of the kitchen. But because I was in Japan, it was a foreigner. They liked the idea, so he took me on originally, and I worked there for about 8 months. I also applied at Gordon Ramsay. Gordon Ramsay, being the English born, Gordon Ramsay has always been a hero of mine. So I have to admit that like when I was working at Ducasse, and when I got the call from Ramsay to say, hey, there's a position, not from Ramsay himself, but from his chef at the restaurant, basically saying like, hey man, there is a position now opened up if you want it. I jumped and went and worked there and worked there for about a year and a half, I think it was. And then just kind of got got bored of it, really. Decided that there was an opportunity at Luke Mangan's place at Salts. I don't think it's there anymore. Opened up and I went and applied there. And the chef Sean, he was a really great guy as well. And what I loved what they were doing. It was much more a little bit more bistro-ish, but like it was a lot more hands-on. Like the thing is with fine French food, it can be very really regimented. And it was at a hotel, like the Ramsay restaurant was at a hotel. And that has its own sort of way
Different
about
feel
it.
to
And it
it.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, so this was like more, it was a restaurant and the chef really liked a little bit more fusion's not the right word, but definitely influence from a lot of different cuisines. So I just yeah, I jumped at the opportunity to go work for him instead because it got me to like learn new things and it was a different atmosphere. It was a lot more fun. And we were getting in whole lamb and at Ramsey's because it was a hotel, there was like a meat department that cut our meat for us and sent it up to us. We might portion it, but they did all the cleaning and got the whole thing in. Like you only got to do little things. Whereas at Salt, it was just like we did everything, and he was changing the menu constantly, and it was an open kitchen, and it was like there was a few other guys in there as well, and it was just a laugh. So it was just a different atmosphere, and I went and worked there. It was a lot of fun, which led me to work for him on a cruise ship out of Australia, which led me to get a position on a private yacht, which I then worked on that yacht for a while. Mickey joined me on that yacht, and then I moved off to a different yacht and then Mickey came and joined me on that yacht. I mean, we worked on that last yacht for like 3.5 years, just straight. We joined it in Spain. I joined it in Spain, did all of Europe on it, went across the Atlantic. And yeah, we did all the Caribbean. We went up to Florida, came back down, Gulf of Mexico, did Mexico, Costa Rica, spent a lot of time in Roatan. Basically, yeah, all the way, and then went all the way up the West Coast as well, and finally got off the boat in Sydney, back where it all began for 3.5 years. And along the way, we saved up the money to open up our first little ramen shop. So yeah,
What an
that's how we
adventure.
ended up. It was, yeah, and you'd think the adventure started there, but I think it just really began because the last 8 years has been a completely different adventure, but equally as crazy and much more demanding, I'd say.
Okay. Really quickly, from all those international experiences, I'm sure there's been a lot that you've gleaned from it, a lot you've taken away, and a lot that's, kind of fueled much of your success that you've experienced now. There are a few things that stand out to you, like what you really were able to glean from all of that.
Being comfortable in uncomfortable situations, being an entrepreneur, the discomfort of having to wear all the different hats and being able to very quickly switch hats and learn new skills. I think that's a big one. Like when you're working on yachts and stuff like that, like as the chef, it was like obviously you're constantly trying to do new things for the guests and dealing with those. But it's like every place you would land, it's like, okay, now I got to figure out like how am I going to get groceries here? Right? Because some yachts, they're like they have no budget. I'm not going to talk about the owners, but our owners were amazing. But they were frugal as far as billionaires are concerned, right? Like they
If
didn't just
such a
let
thing
you.
exists, but yeah.
Yeah, no, really,
Yeah.
they were though, right? Like,
Okay.
there was not just like, oh, just spend whatever you
Whatever you
want and
want.
get me
Yeah, it
the
wasn't
best
like that.
product and wherever, I
Yeah.
want the best steak, so fly that in and do this, do that. No, it was like you're in Roatan, okay, go find food in Roatan. Go to the local grocery store, find the local butcher, like work within where you are, right? Always. Unless we were at somewhere that was just like I'd have to be like, the meat here is not safe. I don't feel comfortable like that. Can you bring something? Otherwise, we would, for nicer stuff, if we stopped through nicer areas, I might load up the freezer a little bit, but not to like a crazy amount. We didn't have, it was a super yacht, but not like it was small in comparison to super yachts, right? So you learn to be resourceful, and that was beneficial. Sure.
Okay. Another thing probably that stands out to me a little bit here is that like just the opportunities that have come your way from those experiences. I was just speaking with a guest like in a whole different area of speciality, a veterinarian, in fact. And she's American and born and raised there, but she actually came over to Japan and she's been working here. She went to school to become a vet in Japan. I mean, becoming a veterinarian within America is incredibly competitive, really, really difficult. So she just kind of opened up her mind to a different world. She had some connections to Japan, came over here, sort of did that. And then now she's working within one of the zoos within this country. It speaks to this point, though, of like the opportunities that are out there if you look beyond your walls, Like I think a lot of people kind of get stuck. This is all I've got right here. And if you're in a space that's fairly competitive or limited in terms of like unique opportunities, that can kind of bog you down a little bit. But like what I like about your story is like you went out into the world and you created these different opportunities, as you mentioned earlier on in Japan 18 years ago. You're getting into restaurants that maybe now would be a little bit more challenging. But from that bravery, I suppose, maybe that's the right word at that time initially, like it's created a lot of different ripple effects for you, I would say, that probably connect up to the success that you're having right now in Crafty Ramen. So I like that story. It's inspirational.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that comes in part from never having real roots as I grew up. We moved around a lot. That final move when I was 15 sort of was the unleashing of me from any one place. So I never really had roots. So I never thought that, well, what is here? It was, to me, it was always, I was like, what's out there, right? And I think I still have that attitude. Yeah, we've definitely got roots now. I've got a 7-year-old daughter, and we love Guelph very much. But like at the same time, my first thought is always, well, if this doesn't work out, where am I going? Right? Because I'm not gonna stay in Guelph and just be like, oh, I'm gonna go, okay, is there a restaurant around here I could go be the chef of? I'm like, no, I'm not gonna go be the chef of like a local restaurant and make minimum wage or whatever, a living wage or something like that and struggle through 12-hour days again. I'm gonna be like, well, maybe it's go back to the oil field. Maybe I should go to the oil fields, or do I go back to the boats? Or, based off my skill set, where can I go get the best return off of what I've learned? And I have no idea where that is, but I wouldn't even now think to tie myself. Although I think that in reality, I'm much more tied to places. And I think that I now, like living in Guelph, I've got 4 brothers and my sister, and I've got nieces and nephews, and my stepmom's here. And obviously my Mickey and Hannah and stuff like that. We are rooted. So I might leave them rooted to stay, but I would unleash myself and just go figure out what and come back. Right. Send the money home,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
go out there and look for the best opportunity possible.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like it's just part of who you are as an individual. So yeah. Now, I'd like to return to the present here. I mean, in terms of Crafty Ramen, the business that you're in, like 2 businesses essentially now, like the CBD to the side of things as well. Both I would assume have, certainly the restaurant business, have inordinately high rates of failure, like incredibly competitive business. Yeah, but
Yes.
you've been experiencing success for quite some time now, and I'd love to hear like what's gone into that. I'm sure it wasn't like smooth sailing out of the gate, but you've been growing, and at least on paper here, it sounds like things are going fairly well.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've worked extremely hard, and we've got a team of people that work extremely hard, and that brings, you make your own luck. So when you're out there every day grinding, both you'll attract people that will grind along with you, and smart people. You've got the right attitude to people, and I'd consider myself. I don't think I'm a smart person, but I'm a lifelong learner. So I'm always looking to learn new things and stuff like that. So I attract other people that have that same mindset to work. They enjoy working along other people that have that mindset, right? So I think that's a huge advantage. And then, yeah, I guess just like you say, that wasn't a success right out of the gate. It was actually kind of was. In a lot of ways, it was a success right out of the gate. And then we realized really initial success. And like, because it was like day one, we opened our restaurant. It's a funny story because we opened it. Our plan was to open up on Valentine's Day, because my thinking was, hey, let's quietly open the restaurant on Valentine's Day, because that'll be a really good soft opening, because nobody's going to come. We're not going to tell anybody we're opening up today. We're just going to open today. We'll tell the night before we're open today, and everybody's going to already have plans because it's Valentine's Day. So we're just going to be quiet, and we can kind of get our feet under us. Well, that didn't work very well at all, because we opened up with a line around the block.
Wow.
There was quite we already had quite a following built up, and a lot of people were very eager to check us out. So we literally opened up first day, and I think we closed within 3 hours because we'd sold out of all of our product.
Get out of here.
Yeah, the second day was like we opened again, and I think we closed again within a couple hours. So we said, hey, sorry, stop. We're stopping. We've got to reset and figure this out because we're too busy, and we were not expecting to be this busy. We thought it was just going to be like 100 bowls a day between me, Mickey, and a sous chef and like a dishwasher, and that would be it. This was just going to be a quiet little mom and pop shop, right? But no, it wasn't. It was nuts. So we literally like shut down, and we didn't even really know any but many people, but we pulled in as many people as we could. We hired as quickly as we could, and then just sort of started back again. So, and then from there out, it, like I said, it was just go, 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 go. And then it wasn't until we opened our second restaurant that we opened that 4 months before COVID. So we had opened this nice big restaurant. The idea behind that restaurant was that we opened it, it was bigger, it had a bigger dining room, and then it had a commissary kind of kitchen, like a bigger kitchen in the back. And the idea is that we would open up, the plan was with Khalil, our business partner, that we would open up 4 more restaurants, and we that would be the hub that would then feed these 6 restaurants. But yeah, like I said, that happened just before COVID. And it also, I won't go into all the details. We were hit by a few headwinds right from the day we opened that place, and challenges. Yeah, just where we had located it. We didn't really understand the demographic as well as we thought we did. You know, there was a couple undesirable elements to the area that have since cleaned up a little bit, which is better. But like it was just, it was a rough start. And then just as we were starting to understand and figure it out, and some of those elements were smoothing, the process of smoothing out, we were understanding what our labor was going to be, again, like figuring out what our labor model should be for that break even point, and etc. Just as we were getting that sorted, 4 months in, boom, COVID shut everything down.
Talk about adversity.
Yeah, it was like, okay. But then, you know, like I said before, COVID was kind of good in a lot of ways because it actually gave us a chance to reset. It gave us a chance to like pull back and just do takeout. So like, and people were ordering takeout really well. And then we launched the kits, and the kits, again, when we launched those, they started off very, like it was, we had launched them on our social media. We would be like, okay, we're going to have 200 of these kits available, and they're going to go on sale at 9 a.m. on Wednesday. And then we did that, or I think it was the second time we did it. The first time they sold out in literally minutes. The second time we did it, they sold out like, I think it was less than a minute. They were gone. People were literally sitting there waiting to order these things. And it was just like, boom. So that was another like smash start. And we were like, okay, these are super popular. This is amazing. So let's do this. So then, you know, instead of sitting back and just being like riding out COVID, we just went like all in on the kits, and okay, can we ship these kits? Let's figure out how to ship the kits. And we figured out how to ship the kits, like last mile, and shipping. It was a fresh product originally, and then we were like, okay, well, this is very limited. And then we started having grocery stores reach out to us, like independent grocery stores, going, can we stock these things? And we want to sell them as well. And we were like, okay, all right. So we converted them from a fresh kit to a frozen kit, so it was something. Otherwise, there was no shelf life on it, right? We couldn't sell you a fresh kit because by the time we got it to you, you would have 2 days to sell it, and then you'd be like, they didn't sell, give us our money back, right? So we're like, okay, let's convert it. Let's make it a frozen kit. So we make it a frozen kit. And then from it being a frozen kit, we were like, okay, well, these are great, but they're kind of like, they're big, and they're very labor intensive, and they have a very high selling point. Margins aren't great on them. And then big grocery stores won't take these things because there's a certain demographic that likes it and wants it, especially at COVID time, right? Because people are looking for experiences. But like long term, these aren't really scalable because Sobeys and Zehrs and Walmart, and they're not going to sell this product, right? So that's where we looked around and we saw this puck or frozen stacked ramen that people were making in Japan, and we were like, okay, maybe we should make that instead. So we made the conversion to that, and then that was the next step. So it's just been a constant innovation and stuff like that. So I mean, every time we figure something out, there's a new struggle ahead of us. So success for us has always felt like it's 6 months to a year away, and it still feels like it's 6 months to a year away because great, we're making these things, we've got them in a bunch of grocery stores, but now it's the traveler life. Okay, well, it's one thing to get them onto the shelf, and it's also another thing to get people to buy the thing. But then how do you also get the customer, make sure that the managers are putting them back on the shelves, stocking them quick enough in order to convert? Because I'm literally going to grocery stores now and being like, looking at the shelves and going, well, look at our products are empty. There's like 2 boxes up there, right? So we know they're selling because there was 24 of them up there and they've sold, but like we're getting feedback from people that they're coming to look for a product and it's not there, it's sold out. So how do we get managers to put them back on the shelves quick enough so we can get the conversion quick enough that we can, like
It's a whole different game, right? It's a whole different game that you're learning.
constantly. So, and like I said, it's not like all these things, they knock back efficiency. They cost extra money. Learning always costs money. So it's like we're constantly we're not successful as in like we're not profitable. We've got a product that people like and want. We're proving that there's a demand for it, but we're not successful like a true CPG company is, like, that has got their products that are being stocked and being sold through and they're making a profit out of it. Us is like,
You're refining still. You're still trying to figure out that game. And
because we keep changing what game we're in and changing our product. Like now we've got it much more locked. It's always just over the hill. There's just one more, we just got to climb this next hill and we'll be there. And then we get to that hill and we're like, oh, this was just a waypoint. We're not at the top. This is a
life of an entrepreneur right there, right? I mean, that's it, probably. It's interesting. I mean, that inflection point, right around COVID, and when you decided to like, well, maybe we could just sell 200 of these kits, and then like what that led to and where you're at right now. Returning to that point before COVID hit, was this ever on your mind of like eventually maybe we could go down this path, or was it because of that opportunity or that moment that it sort of like shifted your mindset? Obviously, like the growth capabilities and potential is there on a much different scale than just having a restaurant. But
like we always had big dreams. So for us, but it was going to be to build like a franchise, right? Like we thought we would have 100 or 1,000 Crafties across Canada. So that's how we saw ourselves scaling and growing. And then I think, Mickey would say that she always dreamed of seeing like an instant Crafty Ramen, right? Like, but like a good one, like, like the ones you get in Japan.
Yeah.
The comparative list, like to what we get here, is just like they're night and day, right? You get a good instant ramen from, the Konbini in Japan, and it's got like, you got a piece of chashu in there, you got your oil, you put in, you got your menma, you got a meal. We always had a dream of doing something like that, but like that was like way out, right? Like first we were going to do is we wanted to just grow the restaurants, eventually franchise. That was our thinking. It wasn't till COVID hit us, and that sort of like even after that, like we launched the Puck at the same time as we were opening the Toronto restaurant. And that was kind of like, we didn't want to fully commit to this. We wanted to sort of like, maybe it's still, we want to grow the restaurant. So let's try to do both things at once, which in hindsight was a mistake because you can't do two things that require so much attention at one time. So that's why the Toronto restaurant kind of suffered. And we ultimately went, well, this has got so much more capability, potential. And by continuing to try to operate the restaurant, we're only going to hurt this. So let's shut that down, take the loss, and focus on doing this.
One more thing I do want to touch on here, and this is a big part of your story, I would imagine as well, is that you've had a unique experience within this entrepreneurial journey. You and your business were featured on the Canadian entrepreneurial program, Dragon's Den. I mean, what led to that? I mean, I'm not even going to ask the questions here. Maybe you could fill us in on that experience and what that meant, how it came about.
Yeah. Once we launched the kit, we started talking about it internally. And just because it was like, well, it's great publicity, right? So if you can get on that show, it's great exposure. So it was just like a no-brainer. And we thought, why not us? I think every entrepreneur goes, why not? We could take a swing at that. And then Khalil's friend was a neighbor of one of the producers or something. And just in passing, happened to mention to Khalil's friend that like, oh yeah, like they're really like they're looking for, I guess they were having that season because it was just after COVID or it was just at the tail end of COVID, like everything hadn't quite opened up. We did our audition, had to all be done through video and stuff like that. And then when we did the show, it was still like there was like social distancing and stuff like that, right? But obviously masks off, but like even on the show, like we couldn't go serve the tables. There was like these weird rules around it, right? So it was still kind of COVID time. They were, I guess, more actively looking for people that would come on the show. So I don't think that we got like it was easier for us to get on the show. It was just that they happened to mention it and we'd already talked about it. And we were like, well, if they're really looking for it, maybe they would take us, right? Because you think about it, you talk about it, you're like, oh, we should do it. But it's like, we looked at the application for it when we first started talking about it. We were just like, oh, this is a lot. And I don't think they're going to take us. It's not really worth the effort. We got more important things to do. But just that nudge of them telling us they're having a hard time to find people for the show, we're like, hey, maybe not. Maybe we should take the swing at it then, right? And it turned out just a really good show. It's been fantastic. We go back there every year. They have a market, do the Dragon's Den market. We were there like 2 weeks ago. Once a year, they do it down at the CBC building. That's where they film it, where they do like a market and stuff like that there. Molly, the producer, is like, we're all on first team bases. And we saw Arlene again and stuff like that. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a really, really great experience. And I recommend it, even just taking the swing at it for any entrepreneur.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. And I'm sure for your business, just again, returning to that point of exposure, probably open things up, and it kind of aligns with what you're trying to do anyway. Is like get these frozen kits into supermarkets, that just that recognition of this brand that they've seen on
Yes.
television and whatnot. Yeah, 100%. I
Yeah.
can see that.
Yeah.
Fun, fun, fun. Got one last question here within the segment of Q&A discovery. I mean, as far as like this life that you've created for yourself, and this business, what has been some of the rub off effects on you personally? I mean, have you got like ramen on your mind 24/7, or like what's that like? Is it easy to distance yourself or to like pull back when you want to? It's one of the hardest things about being an entrepreneur.
No, I would say I'd say it's been all encompassing mostly, especially the last couple years have been with that swap from being a restaurant brand into doing CPG. It's like a whole new world, a whole new industry. It's a lot. I can't deny that. It definitely has taken over our life.
Have you gotten better
But
at kind of turning it off when you need to turn it off, or is that a bit of a struggle at times for you?
honestly, it's can we turn it off? I don't really get to turn like now it's divide and conquer, right? So Mickey deals with the restaurants, and I'm dealing with the market. We call it crafty market side. When everything's going nicely, like right now, we're in a particularly difficult time with the build, so we're all working crazy hours. But even when it's like more routine, because Mickey's dealing with restaurants that are not like are open from 11 to 11, even if I'm off, like if it's the weekend, right? Or if it's the evening or something like that, and I'm getting a time off, Mickey will tend to be dealing with crew issues like I gotta get someone to cover this shift, or she's working late, or this problem or that problem, and it's like they're two different very demanding businesses, but if one of us has downtime, you can guarantee the other one is being called upon for, so you're there to support and then they're there to support, right? So right now it's that also is something just in the distance, hopefully that we can get to a place where we're able to separate who we are from the business. But right now, I'd say it's who we are is the business. Yeah.
I do have one last question here, a words of wisdom segment. I'd love to hear any advice you'd give to somebody who's interested in either opening up a restaurant themselves or going down that path that you're currently on CBG and putting products into the market. Any advice that you'd be able to share with people like that?
For restaurants, if you're going to open a restaurant, make sure that you are willing to be there all the time, right? You can't open a restaurant and be like, oh, I want to do a 9 to 5. You have to be willing to live it. They're very time consuming businesses because they're open up from 11 a.m. till 11 p.m., right? So it's a tough business. You have to really want to do that and not expect to just be able to like get it going and then put a manager in, because the manager's never going to run the restaurant like you're going to run it. You're never going to get the same efficiency. You're never going to get the same profit. You're never going to get the same customer satisfaction out of a restaurant that's not being run by the actual owner. So just make sure if you're going to do that, that's what you want to do. And you're not thinking it's just going to be a revenue stream. There's much better revenue streams out there than restaurants. And even if you're going for a franchise option, our business partner, his family have lots of franchises, and that's always the first piece of advice that he tells potential franchisees is like, hey, you going to work in this thing? Because if you're not, it's not going to work. As far as CPG, I mean, I still feel like I'm too much of a newbie in the CPG world to give any words of wisdom in it. But I would say that if you're going to do CPG, get good mentors. Maybe like either a mentor or a business partner that, because if you think, oh, I've got a really good product idea, right? Either you got to do it like in a way that, okay, you've got a product that can be very easily co-manufactured. You have at least one or two people lined up that you know can make that product for you. So if one of them decides to stop making it for you, you can very quickly switch to the other one, right? Then that takes care of your manufacturing side of it, right? And then you can focus on marketing. If you're a marketing professional or you've got some marketing, advertising, sales experience, then that sort of splits the business up, right? What we're doing is like we're doing manufacturing and we're making our product and we're trying to sell the product. And it is a very, very complicated beast to do. So if you're getting into it without experience in one of those sides of things, get somebody else to do one side of it. And if you're going to do like we were doing, make sure that you have very deep pockets in order to get through it, because it's going to be a massive learning curve. It's very expensive to launch a CPG company. And then it's very expensive to scale it on top of that to a point where it's going to become, to really make it successful. It's one thing to build the brand. It's another thing to get it on the shelf. Like I said, it's another thing to make sure it's getting back on that shelf so it can get off the shelf quick enough so you can continue to get it onto more and more shelves, because you've got to get to scale, in order to make all the costs. And there's a lot of cost. MCBs, which are manufacturer chargebacks, which is still baffling to me. But that's a huge part of it, where you sell product to one of these grocery stores and then they return you an invoice of all the chargebacks that you've got. And none of it makes any sense. The invoice is just it'll be MMPT and then a cost. This did a cost. There's no explanation to it. So you've got to have the time and the energy to dig into that and figure out which one of those are genuine and which one of those shouldn't be, and then go fight off the ones that weren't genuine, right? Because otherwise they're just like, you're like, oh, well, I sold the product to you. You're supposed to give me, and they're like, oh yeah, but there was all these things. And you're like, well, what are those things? They don't tell you. You have to go find out, right? There's a big learning curve. So either have people in your corner that have done it and know this stuff, and right from the get-go, so they can help you build all that into your cost structure, or have very deep pockets so you'll be able to figure it out, right? Or a combination of those things. So like I said, I'm a newbie in it, so I can just tell you that finding experts in a community, luckily the CPG business is, the community of people that are launching different CPG products is actually very, very supportive. There's different Slack channels, and you go to LinkedIn, there's all kinds of, other people doing what you're doing, and they're all struggling just like you are. So you use those networks, get into a network, go out there and talk to people, pick their brains, learn from the lessons that they've encountered. It's going to be very, very valuable. So.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate all of your insight. I think from this conversation, listeners are going to have this really sort of broad overview of what, a business like yours could mean in two senses, right? The two types that you've outlined here. And I know it's going to be valuable. I'm sure listeners are going to absolutely love it. And I know I've taken a lot of your time here today, Jared. But
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it has been on this side as well. Thanks for joining the program.
Thanks a lot, Chris. It's been fantastic.
Now, for those interested in learning more about Jared and his work, you can do so via his website, craftyramen.com. You can also find him over on LinkedIn as well as Instagram. And for reference, all this information, including links, will be in the show notes. And hey, if you like today's show, please be sure to tell a friend and share to show further support. You can always rate, review, and subscribe wherever you access your podcast. As mentioned off the top, I do have that YouTube channel, which does host highlights from these talks. So if you head over there, I'd love a like or subscribe. And finally, don't forget to join us on the next episode of Life as a. You could literally be one listen away from finding your dream job. I'm Christopher Schoenwald, your host. Until next time, don't settle for less. Find the career you were born for.